On the first half of 2006, the Museum of Modern Art in New York held the exhibit On-Site New Architecture in Spain. It was about 35 future buildings at that moment, and 18 were already finished. Here we have this image. According to the Washington Post, that exhibition was proof that the Iberian country has entered the global forefront of architecture. Terence Riley was the curator of this exhibit, and he said, architecture has emerged in Spain as a new form of artistic expression. And this is new, because before, when we referred to Spanish culture and art, we only thought about painting and literature. Well, somehow I have chosen this moment of our recent history because it was like the official recognition in the temple of the art, the MoMA of New York, the recognition of the Spanish architecture, contemporary Spanish architecture. No. As the French writer Victor Hugo said, buildings are the stone pages of history. Architecture reflects the identity, and I would say the maturity, of a society in a particular moment, in a particular period. It has to do not only with creativity, but also with entrepreneurship, with planning, with social structure, with industry. So that's why when we, as Instituto Cervantes, we want to show the Spanish society of today, Spanish culture, is often to refer to architecture. It's not because I am an architect myself, because really it's a sample of what the society has achieved. I wanted to have these two important names as a marketing strategy, you know. Gaudí, of course, everybody knows Gaudí. Someone of you were telling me I love Gaudí, I admire Gaudí. And Calatrava, because also is very well known. And here in Malmo, I mean, the Eiffel Tower of Malmo is the turning torso of Calatrava, is a very well known architect, no? Well, it's a big span of time, it's more than 1 century. And I will try to go one in order, in chronological order, and it will cover, first of all, the time of Gaudí, the time of modernism, of that period of 19th century, where a melange of styles. Then we will pass to the modernity of the avant-gardes of 20th century, when the functionalism, rationalism, modern movement changed completely architecture and the face of the world, we would say. No? Then there was a strong break with the Civil War, of course. And then after the Civil War, there was a period during the dictatorship time, trying to find a sort of national style, no? So it was going back to history. No? And then in the late 50s, 60s, we passed to the recovery, let's say, of this modern spirit, and we will have a number of architects that paved the way for the architecture in the 80s, 90s, architecture in democracy times, that actually flourished with that number of buildings that were shown in this exhibit in New York. Okay, let's try to make a parkour, a journey for this more or less one century, a little bigger style. Actually, these are buildings that were shown in that exhibit I mentioned. Some of them were still projects, not built, and some others were already buildings finished. No? Here we have a drawing of one neo-Gothic building. We are talking about 1800s, 1860, 1870, when in Europe the architecture was trying to renew the architecture of Middle Ages, of the Renaissance period, of Baroque period. That's what is called historicism, because it's bringing the models of the past. Or even you have heard probably the word eclecticism, because in some buildings they picked up features from the different styles. No? So well, we can see in these areas of Stockholm buildings that came from that period and then are featuring characteristics from the past. Siguiente. Yeah. Well, we see this is a church in Madrid of Neo-Byzantine. This was the model for the architect. Next one. Yeah. This is in Barcelona. This is already with some features of modernism. The next one. This is in Madrid, Casa Árabe, featuring Arab architecture, Muslim architecture that was important in the history of Spain, because there were 8 centuries of Islamic presence in Spain. Next one. Yeah. And we look now at Barcelona, at Catalonia, where this Art Nouveau, Jugendstil, or this modernism, is going to flourish. That's happened in Europe in the latest decades of 20th century, and it's somehow a reaction against the classical repertory or historical repertory that was really holding the architects of all these decades. No? So, well, you must have in mind these models of Art Nouveau were models of nature, of leaves, of trees, etc., and other kind of elements that are not directly related to the history, that what was happening since the Renaissance till the 19th century. You know? So, and in Spain, Art Nouveau was not very successful, we have to say that, no? Because you have in Catalonia, especially in Barcelona, where you can have a lot of buildings like that, and in few cities, no? You have, for instance, Cartagena in Murcia, where is a very interesting modernism architecture, and also Melilla, in the north of Africa. And that's why, because disciples of the great Catalan architects were there, no? And they made those buildings that they have learned how to do with the big masters of Catalonia. No? This is a Palau, as the Palau de la Música Catalana. It's an auditorium, famous space for bel canto, especially, and yeah, was designed by a great architect, a little bit shadowed by the fame of Gaudí. But this architect is extraordinary, Domènech y Montaner, and they are fantastic buildings by him that people can be confused thinking that they are Gaudís, but really are not. Next one. Well, we see this, yeah, okay. Or this other, this is close to the Casa Batlló. You have been in Barcelona, you know Casa Batlló. Casa Batlló is at the right. We see some balconies of Casa Batlló. But this is another great architect, Puig y Cadalfats, another fantastic architect with fantastic buildings. That then you see, no, the vocabulary has changed a little bit, including new elements, but still with windows, columns like in Middle Ages. So, I mean, these architects are innovating, but still very much hooked to the historical repertoire. Next one. Yeah. Well, this is. Well, if you see that, you might say this is Gaudí. It might be Gaudí. And also by the use of parables. That is the most logical arc that has better resistance with a less quantity of material. No? And Gaudí is going to use very much this parabol form, no? Paraboloid form. Next one. Next one. Yeah, and this is Antoni Gaudí. This genius that is his value is greater and greater as long the time passes. No, Gaudí was not that much, let's say, his image was not as today in some decades of 20th century, in the middle of the 20th century. Why? Because at the time was rationalism, was functionalism, and all this architecture was seen like kind of extravaganza, no? Something weird that was not matching the streams of the orthodox architecture. But then in the, let's say, middle of 20th century, more and more Gaudí has been recognized as a great, as a fantastic master. Next one. Yeah. This is one of his first designs. One of the houses for rich people in Barcelona. This is interesting because the owner of this house was an industrial man that had a factory of tiles, no? Of tiles. And you know, there is, you know that Gaudí, many of the Gaudí buildings and elements are covered with tiles, even with broken tiles. So this we will see later on. And this comes out from that period, no? That's where we can imagine that Gaudí visited the stores of this gentleman of the factory where there were hundreds and thousands and even broken tiles. And that's where he will incorporate the tiles and even broken tiles, creating something new. The Trancadis after this house. No? He built most of his architecture in Barcelona, but also he had some few works outside Barcelona because of some contacts with important people. Here is in Cantabria, in Comillas, is a seaside city near Santander, and well, for some connections that I won't explain now because it will take time. He built this building that is called El Capricho, no? The Caprice, no? Following some Oriental style somehow. I have to say that now it's a Japanese restaurant. You know, Japanese are amazed with Gaudí. Even there was one guy that came all the way from Japan to Barcelona. He was living in the Sagrada Familia to study the work of Gaudí. No? And now, as I mentioned, this is a Japanese restaurant. Next one. Yeah. This is another building in León. Someone is from León, or the father of someone here is from León. Well, this is to you. And this is Astorga. It's the palace, the bishop palace in Astorga. Also, the bishop was of the same city, the Gaudí. We are countrymen. And yeah, he commissioned this palace by Gaudí. That is, as you see, very much, it looks like a medieval castle somehow. No? So, Gaudí is rooted to this part of the history, with these historical buildings, historicism. Yeah, he's rooted on that, although he will create his own style. No? Next one. Oh, a building, this is an apartment building. Difficult to believe that this is an apartment building in León, in the capital city of León. Next one. Yeah. Okay. This is already in Barcelona. This small building. As a feature also to have these small buildings, we will see several of them. With this tower, the tower always has a very important imprint in the image. This is in Barcelona. Now it's in the campus of a private university there. Next one. Yeah. This is Colegio de las Teresianas. It's a school run by nuns. We see that compact structure. Next one. And here, no, this is one of the corridors inside, where he developed, you know, this type of arc that, as I mentioned, is the most logical arc if you want to bear a big load on that with the minimum amount of material. You can get the same, no? So we can think that Gaudí, because of these shapes, is extravagant, is whimsical, etc. But no, really what he followed was a very rationalistic method, because he knew he had an intuition how the materials work. No? Even now with the studies that are made with computers, they see, the engineers see now that there is a very logical way of design. There are perfect structures in the points, from the point of view of the resistance of materials. Yeah, next one. Well, here we see this cross section with a great order. Okay? And this looks a little bit like Sagrada Familia, but it's not still Sagrada Familia. No? It has several says of buildings like that. This is the church. Well, it's a study for the church of the colonial world. No? In those days, you know, there were these garden villages, no? In this part of history, garden city, and so one of the, the men that really support Gaudí, that was called Well, he was planning to make a colony for suburban area for the employees of these industries, and he commanded Gaudí the creation of this church. No? Where we see again this shape, we saw before arches, and now we see in the shape of a cupola. No? Next one. Yeah. And this is a very interesting, this is a model. This is a model that is kept in Sagrada Familia, and it was his method to project. No? What he did was to put little bags with sand that were equivalent to the weight that different elements have to support. So he put strings, and he put it that way, and these little bags have the normal shapes. If you have this little sack in the middle of a string, and you support with 2 fingers, it's going to make a parallel, no? It's very clear in your house, no? And so what he did is, then once he had this model, he reversed it, no? So he put what is down upside down, no? And that was the shapes of these cupolas of Sagrada Familia, what we saw before. It's not the caprice that he made, no. It was the way the material best resists the weights to support. So it was extremely rational, and with a great precision. No, I tell you now, with all the computer application, modern applications, the engineers are so surprised to see that he was so perfect. No? And imagine, there was no machine, there was nothing. It was all everything made by hand with his head. No? Yeah, next one. Yeah, what we mentioned is Park and Well. It's one of the places, I suppose, some of you or many of you have visited in Barcelona. Otherwise, when you go to Barcelona, I recommend highly. And he has these buildings, as you have seen before, a couple of them, with this little structure that, well, it looks some Walt Disney cartoon, no? But is there contrasted with these elements, or with a vertical element, these towers that are giving that very special feature. No? This is the janitor house of the parking way. No? Again, next one. Yeah, with these elements that are real structures, and we can say even abstract structures, no? Or surrealistic structures, sculptures. Sorry. Yeah, this is the top of this building we saw before, with these elements that, somebody has said that it's surrealistic before, ahead of time, avant la lettre. Next one. Yeah, all these, what you see here, the dragon is very much into the culture of Catalonia, no? It's Sant Jacques and Sant Jaume, and the dragon. And he made this element, but you see that this cover with ceramic tiles, broken ceramic tiles, what has been very popular, and you have seen even nowadays designers and so they use this kind of broken ceramic tiles. That comes all the way from that very fair design we saw, Casa Vicens. And so life is like that, no? I mean, things happen, you have to open your eyes and to include in your parkour elements that maybe you were not thinking about, no? But he had this ceramic factory in his life, and he created out of it this trencadís is the Catalan name of this technique to take pieces of ceramic tiles and put them together. Next one. Yeah. Well, the Parkwell really is a fantastic experience to go around. You see, this is la Sala Hipóstila. No? It reminds of Egyptian temples, no? And with this really magnitude. Next one, please. You see, with this is a terrace. No? It's really just a space that has not a particular function on it, no? Just to be around, to be there, no? Like in a garden. No? Next one. Yeah, this is the viaduct, and so it's very interesting, no? How he made this that looks like a Jurassic Park element with these columns. That is not fancy. Also, is because with this shape is better resisting the stresses of the elements. No. Next one. Yeah, we go to residential buildings. The most well-known buildings, no, by Gaudí. This is the Casa Batlló in Barcelona. Next one. Yeah, we see again the dragon. This is in the roof, no. Even this is an element that you cannot appreciate. This is inside. This is for me it's amazing, no. From the inside, one of those windows. Very much already not in the historical stream, but more in the Art Nouveau. No? Well, somehow can remind us some buildings of Victor Horta in Brussels. This architecture that are already into the modernism, no? Jugendstil. Next one. Yeah. Well, again, the roof. Yeah. This is another building, residential building in the same street, Paseo de Gracia, Barcelona. And this is a little, well, some blocks away from Casa Batlló. This is made out of stone. It's called La Pedrera. Pedrera comes from piedra, from stone, and it's a nickname. No? Somebody said, well, all this stone there is La Pedrera. No? What this also, well, it's so interesting, no? How he designed that out of nothing. It's a total creativity. We cannot say this is related to any other style, no? It's unique in itself, no? And something very interesting of that is that this is facade is in stone, but the structure is in steel. It's well, iron that was very modern, very new at that time. And watching that, we can think on a very massive walls inside. No, inside are really very thin steel columns. No? Next one. Yeah, this is the layout, the plan. We are really, well, you see all these shapes, but this is really a structure, a very ordered structure, very well controlled. No? This is one of the courts. Next one, yeah. Or a detail. Next one. Or this gate, no? It's so modern and so nice, no? And so unique. It can remind like to a microscope view or something like that. Connected, yeah, somehow to the Jugendstil, but in a very, very unique way. No? Next one. Oh, this is the roof of the azotea, no? Where I mean, nobody could go there. I mean, only some people, maybe the people of maintenance of the building. I don't know. But his creativity, never mind. It's not for the people to watch or whatever. It's creation in itself, no? As in the act of creation. In itself, no, with all its value, no? And well, these chimneys are like that, and it's incredible. And that become also like a garden of sculptures, no? They are real sculptures, each column. And also, well, might be a Star Wars aspect, or surrealistic, or whatever you can imagine out of that. No? It's somehow avant time, the abstract art. No? They are shapes that anyone can come up with a different interpretation of it. No? Next one, yeah, which is our details. And again, no, how it's cladded with all these pieces of ceramic tiles, no? Become a feature of the work. Yeah, well, and now we will finish Gaudí with the Sagrada Familia, no? The most famous work by him, in which he was working a lot of years, and actually when last years of his life he was living there. Actually, he was a very humble person. He really had no other intention in life that work on Sagrada Familia in the latest years of his life. Actually, he passed away when a tramway ran over him. And at the beginning, nobody knew very well who was, because he looked more like a beggar. No? He had a coat, very old, and some peanuts and something in his pocket. And well, a few moments later, yeah, everyone recognized him, and then it was really a big event in Barcelona, his funeral and so. But he was someone very mystic, up to a point that it was an idea, a proposal to make him sane. No? So we don't know, maybe in a moment if they discover some miracle by Gaudí, maybe he will be someday a saint of the church. No? Well, here we see, no, the Barcelona, this plan of Barcelona that was very modern, was the extension of Barcelona in 19th century. Like here in Stockholm, in all the European cities, there were this extension of the city. No? Cities up to the Industrial Revolution were small, like here, no? Stockholm was clandestine during many centuries. No? But in the 19th century is this extension in a regular way, and Barcelona, it was after a planner, Cerdà, Ildefonso Cerdà, that created this model, this grid, with chamfers in the junctions of the streets. No? So that's why even today for cars is very good, because you have a big visibility. No? You can see always the cars coming in the direction. Well, here we see in one of these blocks how emerged the Sagrada Familia. Next one. Yeah, this is the main facade. Well, as you know, this is not yet finished, it's almost finished, but Gaudí only could see a very small part of it. No? Even there were no plans, architectural plans as we know today, and so after the death of Gaudí, many people thought that it was impossible to, well, it was impossible, it was not good to build it up, because it's like a sculpture. No? If the sculpture is dead, imagine one sculpture initiated by Michelangelo, who is going to finish. No? So, but then even some people, some architects, for instance, they were against, but badly against the construction, the finishing of the Sagrada Familia. Now, when the interior is finished and you can go inside and you can see what's going on, some of them has changed of opinion, say, well, I was wrong, I thought it was a sin to continue Gaudí's work without Gaudí, but we realized that really is something magnificent, something incredible. No? Next one. Yeah, this is a model that is preserved, the model of the Sagrada Familia that helped, you know, to construct the building. Or no. I mean, out of a model of this size, you have to invent a lot of things to build the real building. Next one. Yeah. Well, we see this is the interior inside of one of the towers, giving this impressive. And this is the nave, the main nave of the building, that was finished not a long time ago. I mean, when I was a boy and went for the first time there, it was only a couple of facades. Inside, the interior was nothing. Next one. Yeah. Well, this is like to show that some of the shapes that we see very complicated and so then are very easy to construct. Following this scheme, no? You can have these hyperboloids and so that are composed by lines, right? Lines that you move, and so you can construct, well, very easy with beams out of steel or whatever. No? The master, great master of that was a Spanish architect that developed his career in Mexico, was Felix Candela, that made really fantastic buildings in this way. Next one. Well, okay. I think that this is a long period, and maybe we should split into conference. I don't know. But now, well, after Gaudí, we see some of the buildings of that period, more or less the same period, still very much rooted in the history. No? This is nowadays is the Instituto Cervantes. This is the building of Instituto in Madrid, and was designed by the great architect from Galicia, but developed his work in Madrid, and he has one of the most outstanding buildings in Madrid, made by Antonio Palacios. Next one. This is the vault of Cervantes. If you go to Madrid, to Instituto Cervantes, you say you are my friends, and they will show you these elements of our building. Next one. Yeah. This is also by Antonio Palacios in the Cibeles, is the main square, one of the main squares in Madrid. And it was the post office. It's like here, no? It was a very important building that with the time now has changed of function. And one of the most photographed buildings in Madrid. This is very near Instituto, and when I was working there, and I passed by every day, I saw people in this corner, lots of people, tourists, making photos of this building. Next one. Yeah. Well, this is more modern, in the same architect, with the evolution of the style and the evolution of the century. No? It's the Círculo de Bellas Artes, it was in the still is, a cultural center, independent cultural center in Madrid. It's a nice terrace and a nice restaurant. If you go there, I recommend you also at least to have a beer there in this terrace of Círculo de Bellas Artes. Next one. Oh, this is another building. There was a hospital, Hospital de Jornaleros. Nowadays is the offices of the regional government of Madrid, in which, of course, there are historical elements, but with a new way of composition. It's a new syntaxis. If you know in Austria, in Vienna, the architecture by Otto Wagner, I don't know if you are familiar with that. For instance, the subway of the station of the subway of Vienna by this architect. Antonio Palacios is somehow parallel. He plays the same role that Otto Wagner in Austria. Next one. Yeah, at that time, there were also French companies, foreign companies that were active in Spain, in Madrid. No? This is the Palace Hotel. It was made in 11 months, design and project. It's amazing, no? To think it was like that. And by French architect, and became one of the most, and is still one of the most important and luxury hotels in Madrid. It has somehow resemblance with Paris buildings, no? Somehow this is French style. That was also in fashion in Europe. This is to show how different styles, different ways of understanding architecture, not only in Spain, but all over Europe. Next one. Yeah, this is another beautiful vault there in the palace, and if you are ready to spend some money, and you can, in a coffee or in a cup of wine, I recommend you to go there, to the ambigu of the palace, and you are beneath this beautiful vault. No? Yeah, at that time, an important moment in that century is in the year 1929, when is the exposition, the expo in Barcelona. No? And this is the Palace of Montjuïc, that was the main building for that event. As you see, still with a very, let's say, historical appearance. No? We see the dome, we see the arches, the little cupolas, etc., etc. No? So it's absolutely historical architecture. Next one. Also, this building that is in Seville, Plaza de España in Seville, where again is this still is this historical look to the past of the architecture. No? We say neo-baroque. But at the very same time, in the very same exhibit, we have that. Imagine, no? What we have seen, and now to see such a modern architecture. It was the German pavilion in the fair, and it was designed by Mies van der Rohe, one of the greatest architects of the new movement, of the modern movement, what changed absolutely the history of architecture. Next one. Yeah. And in Spain, in those decades, the 30s especially, this new architecture, the functionalism, rationalism, as you want to call it, arrived in Spain, and we have some examples like this residential house that is named La Casa de las Flores, the house of the flowers, because of these terraces with this sort of plants. No? This has also in history. For instance, here Pablo Neruda lived here. No, as Chile is again maybe that tone that Chile was calling for this image. No, and well, it has some important people live here. It was very, very modern, extremely modern. You can see what is nude facade. There is no decoration. And is following the function of the building. No? You know that the postulates of the architects like Mies van der Rohe, Le Corbusier, etc., were that the element, the architecture, has to follow the function. No? Even there was an essay by an Austrian architect, Adolf Loos, Ornamento y Delito. No? He said that decoration is a crime. No? So it was up to that point. The stream in these 20s, 30s on. Next one. At that period, also in this very modern period, we have a great engineer. This was an engineer, Eduardo Torroja, no? They designed wonderful structures like this hippodrome in Madrid, el hipódromo de la Zarzuela. You see how it's possible that the roof that is not falling. I mean, it's amazing. No? You see how thin, with no support, only the support at the back, the rear, and also very thin. No? It was because of the new material at that time. It was concrete, and so they were able, and Torroja were able to construct roofs this thick. No? And this is still, and again you see the arches that remind us a little bit what we have seen before about the structure. Next one. Well, new. Next one. Yeah. Well, these are other structures. You know, engineers were very much into the stream of that, no? Because for engineering, the important is the function, of course. To design a bridge is to cross a river. It's not to make nothing else, no? So that's why some of the engineers were doing the good architecture somehow. No? Yeah, next one. And this is all by Eduardo Torroja. This is in Algeciras, it's a market with this very modern structure. Or in Madrid, this building that was Cinema Barceló, and then became a discotheque, very, very well known, very famous in the time of the Movida and so. Those that have been in Madrid knows about Pachá, no? It was this famous discotheque Pachá. Next one. Yeah, you see the plan was a very wise plan, and even in the old days before the computers started to be used by everyone, we used to have, we must have students of architecture and engineering and so. A book like that, it was a Neufer, written by a German, where there were the sizes of everything, patterns of everything, and in that book by Neufer there was this drawing, this cinema, how an example of cinemas, architecture of cinemas. Next one. Well, it's an elevation, a drawing of that. But have in mind, the same architect, keep in mind this kind of architecture. It's Gutiérrez Soto is the name of the architect. This was Cinema Europa. Again, next one. Or this was, this is in the downtown of Madrid. This was my dream when I was young, to live in one of these houses, El Viso. is near the stadium of Real Madrid, the Santiago Bernabéu. And it was, yeah, at that time was one sort of subdivision, not very luxury houses at that time. Now it's several million euros, maybe two figures of million euros, no, to own a house like that. No? But it was very modern, very pure rationalism, like Bauhaus style. No? Next one. Yeah, or the campus of the university, the Universidad de Madrid, also was started in that period pre-war, but then when the war blast, there was really the front line of the battles for Madrid. So it was built really or finished after the war already during Franco time, no? But really the project was previous, even was during the time of the king, no? Was Alfonso XIII who inaugurated, and then during the Republic, the Second Republic. Next one. This is a building that I chose for the open house program, and this is also an iconic building in the Gran Via, Edificio Capitol. It is really one of the examples of rationalism in Europe. No? Next one, well, other pictures, history, again. Yeah, this is a house. I brought this because it was an architect that will become very important, Josep Lluís Sert, Catalan architect that started his career before the war, and then he will be the one who will build the Pavilion of Spain in the Expo, the pavilion which held the Guernica. No? It's something only for that. Sert will be very important. Then he migrated to USA, and then he became one of the most important architects in the United States. No? For instance, some of the buildings of the Massachusetts MTI were designed by him. Next one, please. Well, this is to mark this, the war, the Guernica that was inside this pavilion. You know that Guernica was here in Stockholm. It came here before going to MoMA, because the Guernica was in the MoMA. Picasso said that only when Spain will again be a democracy, the painting should not go to Spain. No? So then, after the exhibition in Paris and so, there was touring of the painting, and it was here in Stockholm displayed. No? Now it's in Reina Sofia Museum, as you know. Well, remember that architect of Pacha? Is the same architect. What happened? No? He built this that is after El Escorial, no? After the model of El Escorial. No? So at that time, Franco time, the idea was to look at the glorious days of the Spanish Empire and to recuperate the grandeur, no? like French say. No? And so this architect, Gutiérrez Soto, he said, well, I always will do what the client wants. No? So a few years before, he was very, very modern, making this avant-garde building, and now he made this historical building that some people call him El Escorial del Aire, because it was El Aire was the ministry of the air forces, no? The quarter of the air forces, and so people call it El Escorial del Aire. Next one. Another building in that style is la Universidad Laboral de Gijón. You know was how to translate it. Como es lo de university, but it's university for skillful things, no? Not for ¿cómo se dice? Espérate, formación profesional. Well, anyway, it was for those people that were trained to be carpenters, to be masons, to be plumbers, etc., etc. No? It was built. This university, next one, in another very historical style, no? with these amazing places. In the last decades, this building in concrete has been really has gained value, no? Because during the after Franco death, of course, all these buildings related to the dictatorship were not very didn't have a great image, we might say, because of ideological things, no? But actually, the architect was a great architect. He was a very wise man, Luis Moya. And as it happened with Gaudí, also his work has been revalorized, no? And now, well, everybody admires this building and other buildings by Luis Moya. No? Well, we go. This is also what we call the new ministries, because there was some of the new public buildings were in that particular building. No? Well, we go following a time sequence, and you see that at the end of in the 50s, no, that stream of modern stream came again. No? So I mean, it was impossible to maintain this historical architecture longer. No? The world had changed completely. No? And so we have this building that well, is very massive and very, well, I would say disruptive, no? In the downtown Madrid, but also planned by an architect, Cabrero, that had really some connections, in the point of view of architecture, with the Italian architects of Mussolini. No? If you go to Rome, there are very good architecture made during Mussolini time, and very modern, some of them, like the La Casa del Faccio, the Terrani, and so on. No? Sometimes, of course, it's unavoidable, no? To link the architecture produced in one time with the power at the time, no? Or the architect of Hitler, Albert Speer. Well, of course, he was a Nazi, but we can make the mistake to ignore as architecture the importance of that or the value of that. No? And so it happened with some of these buildings during the dictatorship time, during Franco time, that really are very good architecture, because those architects were very, very good. Okay? And some of them even have, well, have no idea related to the political stream.
But looks like cells.
Like?
Cells, not pieces.
Cells, yeah, maybe is, yeah, why not, yeah. Well, okay, but some of these architects became really the teachers, were the teachers, the masters of the next generation that came in democracy, no? And as I said at the beginning, one of the reasons that we have, I think we can say proudly, good architecture in Spain is because these guys, no? These guys that in the 50s, in the 60s were teaching architecture and giving some good, very good education to the architects they came afterwards, no? And Francisco Asís Cabrero is one of them. Next one, please. Yeah, you see. Okay. Yeah, one of these architects was Fisac, Miguel Fisac, that combined, because they had a very strong historical formation, no? But they were already innovating and making this transition to the modern architecture. No? Next one, for instance, this church that is at the same time historical but modern at the same time. You see, there's no decoration, no lines of cornice, etc. Next one. Yeah. Very interesting in the 50s is these architects, especially from Catalonia, like this one, Coderch, that adapted the modern movement to the climate, to the conditions of the Mediterranean. So, producing this kind, we can call it Mediterranean rationalism style, no? Because, well, you know, the style was created in Northern Europe. I mean, in Germany, Bauhaus, or Le Corbusier in France, and so it's interesting how Gaudí, especially, and other Catalan architects adapted to the conditions of the Mediterranean Sea. Next one. Yeah. you see some of the, and this is the same architect that we have seen before, making the discotheque, making this Escuela. He had the nickname, well, people call him the Pichichi of the architect, you know. Pichichi was a football player, old football player. The score, he was the best scorer in his time. So nowadays, the footballer that score the biggest number of goals during the season is given the trophy Pichichi, no? So Gutierrez Soto was making a lot of buildings all his life, and so he merited that nickname as the architect who produced the most quantity of buildings and buildings of quality. Actually, he was a great designer. Again, when we see how the evolution of the architecture, we are already in modern times, finally modernism. This was a pavilion of an exhibition in Expo in Brussels in the '68, I think, where young architects then produced this pavilion that was very big acclaim, no? In that expo, no? With hexagons, no? This is the pattern of the design. Next one. Yeah. Or, you know, at those moments where after the Vatican II, the concile in Rome, was the reform in the Catholic Church, and the architecture also followed that reform, making well, buildings more simple, light as protagonist. And so this is by Pisa, is one of the churches at the time, early 60s, that made also an impact, a big influence in younger architects. Next one. Yeah. Following also, well, we see this is an interesting building. Next one, you see very simple. Bueno, paso. Yeah, next one. Yeah, next one. Yeah, okay. Well, okay, and well, we pass to an interesting chapter that are these villages, new villages that were built in remote areas in Spain. No? You know, in Spain after the war and during Franco time, industry was developed, but in Catalonia and in Basque Country, and somehow also in Madrid. But there were other areas that had really nothing, no? And we are the regions that really were having had a very bad situation during Franco time. We are not Catalonia or Basque Country, but this region of Extremadura, parts of Andalusia, even Murcia, and people had to emigrate. That's why now many people, most of the people that live in Catalonia, many people, their parents or grandparents are not Catalan, are from this region, no? In Basque Country, not that much, but also happen somehow, no? So then there was this creation of new villages in rural areas to try to stop this migration that produced that big parts of the country were deserted. No? So and there were young architects, very young architects at that time, but they made fantastic designs. No? I think it's very simple. This is like rural, but at the same time modern. Next one. And so this is an architecture that now has been recognized. It has been several exhibits and books on that. Next one. And this is interesting. This, especially this, because we see also the influence of the Nordic architects. No, the architects, Spanish architects, and other architects of the countries of this generation admire very much all those creators here, like Alvar Aalto in Finland, or well, Jacobsen in Denmark, or of course here Gunnar Asplund. And we see here this design, as I mentioned, in a very small new village, how it's followed somehow the structures, some structures by Alvar Aalto. No? It just remind me very much some of the buildings by Alvar Aalto in Finland. Next one. Well, other architect in this line. Now, this is an interesting case. One of the most iconic buildings of this time, of the 60s, of the modern architecture, is a gymnasium, no? The gymnasium of a school in Madrid, the Colegio Maravillas, we see like that from outside, but the interesting thing is inside. You know, this is the, well, this sports facility of the school, where, well, we see the light, this way of getting the light from one side, next one, with these shapes. This is the cross section, no? So we see that the sports court, and then we have a roof where is the playground of the kids, no? So the interesting thing is that, no, that he creates a fantastic space with a fantastic light in a sort of space that is, let's say, underground, no? So, and he created a special atmosphere thanks to the light, no? Light is important, one of the, well, actually architecture is especially about light and about space, no? And so De La Sota got, well, this development in time, one iconic building also, Torres Blancas. They say Torres Blancas, white towers. They are not towers because it's one tower, and they are not white, no? But mainly white towers, no? Also with very futuristic image, with these terraces rounded. People living there are not that happy because they say that they don't find furniture to fit into the round rooms, no? But well, next one, yeah. Also another iconic building, La Pagoda, was called La Pagoda by Fisac. It was demolished, and it was not, well, some years ago, no? But maybe 10, 15 years.
I think less. No?
Less even, no?
Yeah.
We thought that we have protected our heritage, architectural heritage, but not really up to the point. So, because this was a private, it was a laboratory, no? Right. And, well, they demolished, so it's not existing anymore, no? Yeah. Well, this is this church, La Iglesia de los Mexicanos, is very popular in Madrid. And it was, well, signed by some Spanish architects, but actually behind that we have the two great figures of the 20th century. Félix Candela, this Spanish-Mexican architect that developed fantastic architecture in Mexico, and then Torroja, the engineer that we saw, no? So they were behind the project, no? And, well, it's a special architecture, and also it's, well, many people of Madrid goes to that church. Well, this is about a very special architect, very creative architect, not as well known as other, Fernando Higueras. He produced this, it was a colony for artists, no? They're houses for artists with very flamboyant shapes. Next one. We see the model of that, was not constructed. But we see, and yeah, okay, next one. And this is, we are jumping to the United States, where Joseph Duisset, the architect of the Pavilion of Guernica, was having a very successful career as an American architect, we might say. No? Next one. Yeah. Coderch, that architect that we saw that started to create this Mediterranean style, also was making buildings of high-rise building in Barcelona. In Spain there are not many skyscrapers. Something very weird, no? But then in Barcelona, those buildings were very modern at its time, and still are giving that image, modern image of architecture. Next one. Yeah. In Spain, Madrid, Barcelona, there always this rivalry. And Joan Coderch produced also this very interesting building in Madrid, where all the buildings, well, unlike this quarter in Madrid, Parque de Salamanca, is like here in the center of Stockholm, are blocks, very flat facades. And well, he broke the flatness of the facade, creating this structure, no, with these balconies, and giving well, a very interesting image, and not really breaking very much the idea of a house in the block. No? And then it was famous also because probably the most famous hairdresser of the period had his shop there, his hairdress salon. John Guedas, no, was there. No? One of the architects, probably the first Spanish architect in this time or ever, that had a very successful career outside Spain. It was Ricardo Bofill, also a Catalan architect. He didn't finish his studies of architecture, so he couldn't sign his project, but he has a lot of fellows that did it for him. No? And he developed his own style, this evolution of the modern movement, creating in the early 60s buildings that have become iconic nowadays. Next one. Next one. Yeah, this is near Barcelona, well, the other was in Valencia. Well, next one. Well, keep in mind those images of geometrical buildings, because we will see another Bofill, very different also. No? And this is another fellow that had success outside, is Rafael Moneo. Maybe some of you recognize his name. This is, for me, one of the best residential buildings in San Sebastian. Next one. High tech. We are arriving at a time where, well, we remember the Pompidou Center in Paris, where is giving this aspect of industrial building with installation on site, etc. So in Madrid, in the main road of Madrid, in Paseo de la Castellana, in the 60s, they started to build like that, no? Very modern buildings. In some cases, it was a kind of tragedy because they demolished palaces, no? Petit palaces that made really a very different image of this street. No? Only a few of them remain there. No? Next one. Yeah, this is also something that was extremely popular in its time, and it is also announcing the postmodern architecture, no? Postmodernismo. And this is by a Catalan architect also, Tusquets. He was a good friend of Dalí, for instance, and well, he's a character. No? He's the founder of a publishing house and a real character. No? So he came up, you know, with this. This is very small. This is a pavilion in a guest house in a property near Barcelona, and he put all these balustrade and these columns and making something very weird. You can see that that car there on the roof. So that means that the car park is at the roof, and the house is beneath. No? Next one. Yeah, well, one of these, let's say, high-tech buildings, banks in this road of Madrid, Paseo de la Castellana, where you can see different kind of architecture. Next one, we go faster. Tourism architecture, very important tourism in Spain. So this is by Fernando Higueras. It's in Lanzarote, and it's also a very interesting hotel, Hotel Las Salinas. No? Next one. We are in the 70s already. We have this architect Canolaso that is following this. This is in the south of Spain, and is following inspiration from Arab countries, no? that remind us to the architecture in the northern part of Africa. No? Next one. He made fantastic drawings. Moneo in Logroño is already, we are starting development of the modern architecture, but in a different way. Also, there was a very iconic building in Madrid, in the same road, in Paseo de la Castellana, Inter building, where they didn't destroy the palace. It's still the Petit Palace by the road, and then he came up with that building, the Bank Inter, that was also very influential and made Moneo famous. And let's say in that moment Moneo was not that famous, but when he built Bank Inter, he became one of the most important architects in Spain. Next one. Yeah. Well, we saw the image. Also, this building by Felix Cabrero, that was my teacher in the school, and he made in downtown Madrid this building that is an adaptation of modern movement of the rationalism to a historical town, to a block in the historical town. No? You see with this window in the corner. Yeah. We go with Moneo. One of the most outstanding buildings of Moneo was the construction of this Roman Roman art museum in Mérida. No? You know, in Mérida was a very important Roman city, and there is this theater where it's very well kept and where they have in summer this season of theater. No? It's a classical plays and modern plays. It's fantastic. No? It's very hot. That's true. 40 degrees during the day, but it is fantastic theater festival. Very recommended. And Moneo came out with this fantastic building. Museums at that period started to be more important than the works inside. So never mind what is inside. The visit to the museum is the most important thing to the architecture. Next one. Pasa. In Pasa. Yeah, we go finishing. This is interesting also because, you know, this architect, Navarro Valdevez, was also very much inspired by the Nordic architects, Nordic architecture. No? Somehow this library in downtown Madrid is based in Rasco, library we have here in Stockholm. Next one. Yeah. Well, postmodern, yeah, we are in the 80s. Rationalism is behind. Decoration is not a crime anymore. And so we start to see different elements. Next one. Like, well, this was a very controversial building in Madrid because inside is like that, and it's a good idea, no? But outside is like that. Next one. Yeah, you see the word cells, imagine what is this. They call it like that, Cárcel del Pueblo, the people's prison, no? But the point is that this is facing to the M30, to the highway, terrible, noisy. No. So what he did is to make that, and so are only the kitchens and the bathrooms and so there. And inside you have that garden. So the idea, I think, is very good, but most of people don't know what is inside and don't know about that. No? So that's what happens. Sometimes we criticize architects or anyone, but we don't know what is inside there, no? What is going on. Next one. Well, this is very briefly, you can go passing, about the importance of restoration and of intervention in historical buildings. And this is an interesting example in San Pedro de Rodas, a monastery in Catalonia, in Girona. Next one. Next one. And this was really very important from the 80s on. All the interventions in historical buildings, ruins, or buildings that were in bad condition, or to find new function, no? New function for our building. So this is like a library in Lerida. Next one. Next one. Combining modern, you see there, with the old structure. Next one, next one. Well, we are about to finish, and well, we pass very fast because this is Enrique Miralles. This was a genius. Unfortunately, he passed away at the age of 50. Some of his works, well, this is a sports palace, sports facility in Huesca. The Parliament of Edinburgh, probably, was his most famous work outside Spain. And he was actually, yeah, next one, someone with the imagination of Gaudí and the skills. And he produced fantastic buildings that are there. But, you know, architects till 40 years are considered young architects, up to 40, no? So that means that some of the architects produce their best when they are in their 50s or 60s or so. So what would have happened if Enrique Miralles was still alive? And well, we are arriving at the end, we are arriving at Calatrava. You know, Calatrava is an engineer. He studied engineering in Switzerland. He's an architect. He studied in Valencia. And he's a sculptor also. well, it's a sort of genius as Gaudí somehow. No? For me, actually, Calatrava is best as an engineer than as an architect. And some of his first works, engineering works, for me are the best. No? But well, he developed all these structures. He became so famous. Many cities want to have a Calatrava. It's like to have a Picasso or like to have a Gaudí or whatever. And he has produced amazing structures. No? Pasa. But again, no, this is a bridge in Seville. It's a fantastic, beautiful, etc. Simple. No? Yeah, well, vete pasando. Yeah. So la marcha, this was an important moment. Seville, Expo Seville, 92, where Spain was showing that it was a modern country with very important buildings. In the same year was the Olympics in Barcelona. Also some great architects, foreign architects have made great works in Spain. For instance, it was Arata Isozaki, the Japanese architect, who designed this sports arena. No? Next one. Yeah, we see, and then there's a tower designed by Calatrava. This is called Cerola Tower. It's a communication tower in the Olympic area, no? Olympic campus. Next one. Well, we continue, we pass. Campo Baeza, one of the greatest architects of our time, that is really a purity architecture. He hates to be considered as minimalist. He says is essentialist. No? He goes to the really essence of architecture. Light for him is, and he's amazing how he mastered light. No? Well, we pass, we continue. This is a Moneo building, but we don't have much time. Of course, Guggenheim. Bilbao changed completely the image of Bilbao in the world. Next one. Yeah, and Calatrava in Valencia, one of the most outstanding structures in Spain, we might say. Next one. Yeah, Calatrava buildings used to have problems. Technical problems, the bridge in Venice that was sliding, whatever. Yeah, the point is that these are prototypes. These are prototypes made once at a stroke. When you have a car or a plane or something like that, there are a lot of tests. When the car is there, it has been tested. Buildings like that, there's no test. You made it, and that's it. No? So that's one of the reasons, I think, why these iconic or weird buildings might have problems. No? Well, this is, well, we go ahead, some of the Enrique Miralles works with well, pasa, ya vamos a acabar. Yeah, maybe you have been in Oslo recently. Well, this is not Oslo, this is Las Palmas, the Gran Canaria, but this is the same architect. Yeah, well, here he has a couple, and then he made himself. But it's very similar to the tower of the Munch Museum in Oslo. Pasa. Bueno, pasa, todo esto ya no lo tenemos. Pasa. Well, this is interesting, this building, but we don't have time. This is a Herzog de Muron. The four towers, I say, that is not common to find buildings like that, but this is the new image, the new architectural icon in Madrid, the four towers at the north edge. One of them is Norman Foster, and some other. Well, let's stop a little bit here. You recognize this? You recognize? This is Stockholm, and it's Sodermal, and it's Ricardo Bofill. Yes, Ricardo Bofill, who built this complex some years back. See? Next one. Well, you see that? Next one. Well, everybody knows that, no? Calatrava in Malmö, beautiful photo, no? With the bridge there and so on. Next one. Well, see it. Here you recognize also, well, I'm showing you the buildings by Spanish architects here in Sweden. Moderna Museet, with this light, these elements, and Moneo was able to make something that you you don't see out from outside. Actually, it's hidden there. And I think that he knew to understand what is Swedish society, you know, at least it's not like ours that you have to show yourself and to be distinguished from the neighbor. Here it is more even, and I think that monogamy. This is Munch in Oslo by Juan Herreros, following the design. I don't know why, actually you might say, why you are putting those upper floors like that? Well, anyway, the image is in, and it's over. Well, okay, so as conclusions, we may say that contemporary Spanish architecture is a mirror of our recent history. We went through the creative idealism of Gaudí, the modernity cut short by the Civil War, this beginning of modernity in Spain. Then during Franco regime with the search for an identity, trying to reconstruct the image of Spain, but in an interior way. And then in the late 50s, 60s, we had the recovery of modernity with architects like Fisac or De La Sota. And then the international opening in democracy time with Moneo, Calatrava, Profil, and some others. Today, Spain boasts a world-renowned architecture that continues to combine tradition, innovation, and experimentation. And thank you very much for your patience.